They laughed at a simple janitor, dumping her belongings on the floor to humiliate her in front of everyone. But when the general's medal fell out of her bag, the whole hall went silent. Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching this video from. The morning light fell sharp and gold across the towers of the Helios Military Academy, glinting off steel and glass as if the entire place had been forged out of pride itself. Cadets marched in perfect synchrony across the central courtyard, their boots striking the marble in time with the rhythm of the drums. Flags rippled in the cool wind, emblems of honor, sacrifice, victory. Beneath those banners of polished glory, a lone figure pushed a mop across the glimmering floor of the entrance hall, her steps quiet, almost invisible against the thunder of command voices. Maria Devereaux was used to being invisible. She moved with a patience that was not submission, but restraint. Each motion precise, economical, as though she measured her every breath. Her dark skin shone faintly with sweat under the overhead lights, and her uniform gray overalls marked with the insignia of maintenance hung loose on a frame built for endurance, not show. Around her neck, tucked beneath the collar, hung a small leather pouch worn smooth by years of touch. No one had ever seen what was inside, though some whispered about it in passing. Every morning Maria arrived before dawn, long before the cadets began their drills. She scrubbed the same floors that bore the prints of polished boots and brass heels, wiped the dust from portraits of dead heroes, and changed the water in vases placed before memorials most of the cadets never noticed. Yet, in the smallest moments, when she straightened a crooked frame, when her gaze lingered on a name carved in marble, there was something in her face that did not belong to a servant. There was command in the set of her jaw, precision in the way she stood. The Hall of Heroes was her least favorite place, though it was where she always began her day. Along the far wall stretched an expanse of marble tablets engraved with names of the fallen. The golden letters caught the morning sun, throwing warm reflections across the spotless floor. Her mop paused at one tablet, the motion of her hand slowing almost to stillness. General Raphael Devereaux, killed in action battle of Laconia. The words had long since been memorized, carved as sharply into her memory as into the stone itself. She stared at the inscription until her reflection blurred in the polished marble. Her lips pressed together, and for a fleeting second, the air around her seemed to change. Like the pulse of memory, heavy and suffocating. Smoke, screams, the crack of gunfire. A man's voice, deep and commanding, shouting over chaos. "Get them out, Maria! Now!" The echo faded as quickly as it came. Her fingers brushed the cool surface of the tablet, then the small pouch under her collar. The motion was soft, reverent. Behind her, laughter broke through the silence. Young, careless laughter that did not belong near the dead. 3 cadets in pressed uniforms were lounging near the entrance, pretending to polish their insignias while they watched her. "Look at her," one murmured, loud enough for the others to hear, "working like she's part of the display." Another smirked. "Maybe she likes being around the heroes. Helps her forget she'll never be one." Maria didn't turn. She had learned long ago that silence hurt them more than anger. She finished her work, poured the dirty water into the drain, and moved on. At breakfast, the grand hall buzzed with conversation and clinking silverware. The cadets, all sons and daughters of admirals, governors, and politicians, filled the room with confidence so thick it stifled the air. Above them hung banners embroidered with gold thread, each representing a different campaign of the Helios forces. Maria walked quietly between the tables, collecting trays and wiping spills. The smell of coffee and roasted meat filled the space, but her stomach stayed empty. She would eat later, in the basement kitchen, when no one else was around. A spoon clattered near her feet. She bent to pick it up, but before she could, a polished boot kicked it out of reach. "You missed a spot, Miss Mop," said Allison Hawke, the cadet commander of 3rd Battalion. Tall, blonde, and sharp as glass, Allison carried herself like the academy belonged to her family, which, in a way, it did. Her father, Colonel Marcus Hawke, had been head of the academy for 12 years. Maria straightened slowly, the spoon still in her hand. Their eyes met briefly. Allison's smirk wavered, just a fraction, then returned even sharper. "You really should be more careful," she added, tossing a napkin onto the floor beside the table. "Wouldn't want to lose your job over dust." The others laughed. Maria said nothing. She placed the spoon on the tray and moved on. Later, when the noise of the hall had faded, she went out to the courtyard. The drills were in full swing. Rows of cadets practiced formation under the eye of instructors barking orders. Maria stood beside a pillar, pretending to polish its base while she watched. Her gaze tracked their movements, not with admiration, but with critique. Their spacing was off by half a pace, their turns too slow. Without realizing it, her own feet shifted, aligning with the rhythm, her posture correcting itself into perfect formation. When one of the younger cadets stumbled and dropped his rifle, she moved before anyone else could react. The weapon hit the ground only for a second before Maria caught it, spun it upward, and handed it back butt first. Her motion was fluid, reflexive, precise. The boy blinked, stammered a thank you, but Maria was already gone, her mop bucket rolling softly across the stone. By evening, the academy's brilliance dulled under the weight of dusk. Maria returned to the maintenance quarters, a narrow room beneath the west wing, its single window facing a courtyard wall. She hung her jacket, washed her hands, and sat on the narrow cot. On the small shelf beside her lay a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age and sealed with a faded wax crest, the emblem of the Helios Defense Ministry. Next to it, wrapped in cloth, was a tarnished dog tag. She unwrapped it slowly, tracing the engraved name with her thumb. R. Devereaux. The memory struck again, unbidden, the sound of rain over static, the smell of burnt metal, her father's hand gripping her shoulder, pushing her toward safety, his last words to her before the explosion. She had carried those words in this tag ever since, along with a weight that never lightened. Outside, the academy lights flickered on, bathing the campus in white and gold. Through the window, she could see the Hall of Heroes glowing against the night. She thought of the faces that had sneered at her that morning, the laughter, the disregard. They would never imagine who she was, who she had been. Maybe it was better that way. She leaned back against the wall, eyes closed, breathing slowly until the hum of the building settled into rhythm with her pulse. Tomorrow would be the ceremony, the inspection, the parade, the visit of the Minister of Defense. The entire academy was preparing for glory. Maria would clean the halls, polish the floors, and fade into the background once more. And yet beneath the stillness, something had begun to stir, something that had waited 20 years in silence, beneath dust and lies. The name on the marble, the pouch around her neck, the metal that the world believed lost forever. All of it would come back into the light soon enough. When she finally drifted to sleep, the last thing she heard was the faint echo of marching boots above her room, the sound of the next generation of soldiers walking over the ghosts of the last. She did not know it yet, but by the time the sun rose again, her name would no longer be whispered in hallways as a joke. It would be spoken in awe and in fear. The academy, with all its gleaming banners and spotless marble, was about to remember who Maria Devereaux really was. The dawn broke over Helios Academy like the sound of a trumpet, sharp, bright, and commanding. The parade grounds were already alive with motion. Flags snapped in the wind, brass gleamed in the rising sun, and cadets in full-dress uniforms moved in choreographed precision across the stone courtyard. In the great hall, floral arrangements lined the marble staircases, and every surface had been polished to a mirror's shine. Tomorrow the Minister of Defense himself would arrive, and the academy had been preparing for weeks. Everything, from the gleam of the chandeliers to the shine on the cadets' boots, had to reflect perfection. Maria Devereaux had been awake since before the morning bell. Her mop bucket clattered softly as she rolled it down the eastern corridor, her breath slow and steady. She felt the tension in the air. Anticipation, pride, and vanity all braided together like a storm about to break. She had seen it before in other places, long ago, before the world decided she was better suited to cleaning than commanding. The younger cadets hurried past her without so much as a glance. One nearly ran into her and muttered a half-hearted sorry, but his tone made it sound like an insult. The instructors shouted orders over the noise, voices echoing off the tall ceilings. Maria paused by a window, watching the banners being hung outside. The crest of Helios, an iron sun over a silver horizon, fluttered in the wind. Its rays caught the light, blindingly bright, like truth buried beneath layers of polish. By mid-morning, the main hall was crowded. The cadets were practicing their welcoming formation, and groups of officials wandered through to inspect the preparations. Maria moved among them, unnoticed as always, wiping down the railing of the grand staircase. The murmur of voices surrounded her, chatter about speeches, medals, and political alliances. It was a world she had once belonged to and now observed from the margins. Allison Hawke, the Academy's golden daughter, stood at the center of it all. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair tied back with military precision, every inch of her a reflection of her father's ambition. Around her clustered her usual entourage cadets, eager for her approval, laughing too loudly at her smallest remarks. When Maria passed behind them, Allison's eyes flicked toward her, and a smirk curved her lips. "Careful with the floor, Devereaux," she said, her voice loud enough to carry. "Wouldn't want the minister slipping on your incompetence." Laughter rippled through the group. Maria said nothing, her hands steady on the mop handle. She'd been baited too many times to rise to it. That calm only seemed to provoke Allison further. "You know," the cadet continued, "I've always wondered how you ended up here. Did someone feel sorry for you? Or are you just good at pretending to be useful?" One of the younger cadets, nervous and eager to impress, chimed in. "Maybe she likes it here. Being around real soldiers must make her feel important." The laughter grew louder. Maria didn't look up. She wrung out the mop, the water swirling dark gray, and resumed cleaning. The noise in the hall swelled as the rehearsal ended and the cadets began to disperse. Maria's bucket rolled over the marble, the sound hollow in the vast space. She was nearly finished when she felt a shadow fall across her. She turned slowly to find Allison standing over her with a sweet, venomous smile. "I think you missed a spot," Allison said. She pointed to the floor beside Maria's foot, where there was nothing but the reflection of the chandelier. Maria met her gaze briefly, then lowered it again, her voice even. "I'll get to it." But Allison didn't move. She leaned closer, her tone dropping into mock concern. "You really should be more careful with what you carry around here. People might start thinking you're hiding something." Maria frowned slightly, confused by the remark. Allison's friends tittered behind her. Then, with deliberate slowness, Allison reached down and snatched the worn leather bag from Maria's shoulder. "Hey," Maria began, but before she could stop her, Allison had already pulled the strap free and turned to the crowd. "Let's see what our loyal janitor keeps in her treasure chest," she announced. The room fell quiet. A few cadets laughed uncertainly, but most watched in uneasy fascination. The bag was small, weathered from years of use. Allison held it by the strap like a captured prize, then upended it over the polished floor. Its contents spilled out a few coins, a folded handkerchief, a small loaf of hard bread wrapped in paper, a cracked watch missing its glass face, and an old photograph, edges curled with time. The picture showed a man in a military uniform with a young girl beside him, both smiling. The laughter started again. "Is that your boyfriend, janitor?" one cadet sneered. "Did he run off and leave you?" Maria bent down, gathering the scattered items with steady hands. "Please, give it back." But Allison wasn't done. As Maria reached for the photograph, Allison's boot came down hard, pinning it to the floor. The sound of tearing paper echoed faintly as the corner ripped beneath the pressure. "Oh, look at this," she said sweetly, grinding her heel into the image. "She even carries around pictures. How touching. The maid and her imaginary soldier." A few of the cadets laughed, though uneasily now. Maria's face was unreadable, her movements slow as she picked up the rest of her belongings. Only when Allison lifted her foot did she retrieve the torn photograph, brushing it gently against her sleeve to clean away the dirt. "It's just a photo," she said quietly. The words carried further than she intended. The hall fell still for a heartbeat, as though the calm in her voice unsettled them more than anger would have. Then Allison let out a short, nervous laugh. "You hear that? It's just a photo. Maybe it's fake, like the rest of her life." A young man from the back, bolder now, added, "Bet she stole it. Thieves always keep trophies." Maria didn't respond. She stood slowly, slipping the photograph into her pocket, and looked at the group before her. Her eyes met the boy's, steady, unblinking. "Are you done?" The boy faltered. For a second, something in her gaze broke through his bravado. His smirk vanished. The others laughed at his silence, but it was forced, brittle. Allison bent down again, rummaging through the bag. She lifted out a small notebook with cracked leather covers and flipped it open. "What's this?" "Her diary." She read aloud in a mock whisper. "For honor, for Helios, for father." The words hung in the air like smoke. "How pathetic," she said, tossing the notebook aside. Before she could continue, a firm voice cut through the laughter. "That's enough." Colonel Hawke had entered the hall, his presence immediately commanding silence. His boots clicked against the marble as he approached, eyes sweeping over the scene. The spilled contents of the bag, the gathered cadets, his daughter standing smugly in the center, it all told him everything he needed to know. "We hire too many strays in this place," he said coldly, his gaze settling on Maria. "Pick up your things and get out of my sight." Maria bent down, gathering her belongings without a word. Her hands were steady, but her jaw tightened. When she rose, she faced the colonel. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, long enough for him to see something there that made his own expression falter. Then it was gone. As Maria turned to leave, a smaller voice spoke up from the back of Cadet, eager to earn favor. "She probably lives in a cardboard box," the girl said, laughing too loudly. "This place is too good for her." The colonel didn't reprimand her. The laughter resumed, echoing against the walls of the grand hall. Maria walked through it, past the rows of faces, her worn sneakers nearly silent on the polished floor. She didn't look back. Outside, the cold air struck her like a baptism. She stopped by one of the tall windows overlooking the courtyard, her reflection faint in the glass. The academy's flag rippled in the distance, its golden sun blazing against the sky. She adjusted the strap of her bag, her fingers brushing the torn photograph inside. Her shoulders sagged for just a heartbeat, the only sign of what the moment had cost her. Near the steps, an old gardener pushing a wheelbarrow paused to watch her. He'd seen her before, always quiet, always alone, never complaining. He looked after her as she walked away, shaking his head softly. "They don't know who they're dealing with," he muttered. Back inside, the colonel turned to his daughter. "Next time, handle your amusements somewhere private," he said curtly. Allison forced a smile and nodded, but inside her chest something twisted. The way Maria had looked at her, calm and unbroken, had lodged itself in her mind like a splinter. Far across the hall, Captain Sloan watched the entire scene from the shadows. His weathered face betrayed no expression, but his hands were clenched behind his back. When Maria's torn photograph had fallen to the floor, he'd caught a glimpse of it and of the man's face beside her. His heart had stumbled in his chest. He had seen that face before, long ago, on a battlefield soaked in smoke and blood. By nightfall, the academy was quiet again, but the echo of laughter lingered in its halls. Maria lay on her cot in the dark, the torn photograph beside her. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the day not with shame, but with the clarity of understanding. The past had found its way back into her life. She could feel it like a pulse beneath the surface, waiting to break free. Tomorrow would bring another day of drills, orders, and pride. But something had shifted. The Helios Academy, so sure of its own glory, had unknowingly lit the fuse that would burn through its polished lies. Night hung over the Helios Academy like a closed fist. The corridors, usually bright with the echoes of marching boots, had gone silent. Lights burned low behind frosted glass, and the marble floors reflected the faint blue glow of security lamps. Somewhere in the West Wing, a janitor's cart creaked over the tiles, its wheels squealing in the stillness. Maria Devereaux moved through the darkness, her shadow long and steady. Every step was deliberate. The same halls that had humiliated her hours ago now felt like a cage closing around the truth. The day's events clung to her like dust she couldn't wash away. The laughter, the faces, Allison Hawke's cold eyes pressing her heel into the photograph. Maria had said nothing then, but silence wasn't surrender. Silence was the armor she had learned to wear, the weapon she drew only when it mattered. And now she felt it again, that faint, restless stirring of something buried too long. She stopped by the memorial wall, the same one she cleaned every morning. The golden letters of her father's name caught the dim light. General Raphael Devereaux, killed in action. Her fingers brushed the engraved letters. They were cold, indifferent, false. She whispered, "Not yet." Then she turned and continued down the corridor, her bag slung over her shoulder, her pace measured like a soldier marching toward a battle she'd already fought once before. In Colonel Hawk's office, the lights still burned. The colonel sat behind his desk, the spilled contents of Maria's bag laid out neatly before him. He examined the metal again, holding it up to the lamplight. Its silver surface shimmered faintly, and the insignia, the blazing sun of Helios, glowed like an accusation. He traced the inscription on the back. R. Devereaux. His face hardened. The door opened, and Captain Sloane entered quietly. The older man's uniform was slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Sir, the cadets have been dismissed. I wanted to discuss—" "Not now," Hawk cut him off. His voice was sharp, tight. "You've seen this, haven't you?" He held up the medal. Sloane froze. "That's impossible." "Apparently not." Hawk set it down. "She claims it's hers. Do you know what that means for this institution, if anyone believes her?" "I know what it means for the truth," Sloane said softly. Hawk's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Captain." But Sloane didn't look away. He nodded toward the medal. "I've seen it before. 20 years ago. Battle of Laconia. She was there. She carried out a rescue operation when our lines collapsed." His voice grew heavier. "When you retreated, sir." Hawk's hand stilled on the desk. "You're mistaken." "Am I?" Sloane stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The files were classified, the reports rewritten. But I remember her. She was a lieutenant then, the daughter of General Devereaux himself. You left them to die." The colonel's face twisted. "That's enough." He slammed a folder shut. "You're treading on dangerous ground." Sloane hesitated. "Sir, if you bury this again—" "Get out," Hawk snapped. His voice cracked like a whip. Sloane stood still for a moment longer, then saluted sharply and left. As the door closed, Hawk leaned back in his chair, his breath shallow. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't authority. It was fear. In her quarters, Maria sat at the small wooden table, the torn photograph spread before her. She had tried to mend it with tape, but the crease cut through her father's image like a scar. The same face that stared down from the Academy's banners, the man the world believed dead. Her mind drifted back to that last mission, the roar of engines, the firestorm swallowing the trenches, the order he gave her with no hesitation, take them and go. She had obeyed. He hadn't returned. When the explosion came, it was no memory. It was real. A deep, mechanical boom rolled through the night, rattling the window panes. Maria jumped to her feet. Down the hall, red lights began to flash, alarms wailing in sequence. She grabbed her bag and ran. By the time she reached the main auditorium, a crowd had gathered. The large screen at the front of the hall flickered to life. Static, then a faint image. It wasn't the security feed. It was older, grainy, marked with the insignia of the Helios Command Archives. The cadets murmured in confusion as the picture stabilized. The video showed a ceremony. The banners were older, faded by time. In the center stood General Raphael Devereaux, his uniform immaculate, his face proud but weary. Beside him was a young woman in combat fatigues, her arm bandaged, her expression tense with grief. The general's voice filled the hall, calm and resolute. "For valor and honor in the line of fire, for saving the lives of 50 men under impossible odds, I present this medal to Lieutenant Maria Devereaux." The gasp that followed seemed to echo for miles. The camera lingered on her younger face, unmistakable even through the distortion. The same eyes, the same calm. Maria stood frozen among the crowd, her heart hammering. She hadn't seen that footage since the day it was recorded. It wasn't supposed to exist. She had believed it destroyed with the rest of the archives. The screen flickered again, switching to combat footage. Explosions, retreating troops, a transmission log overlaying the chaos. A voice crackled over the radio. "This is Colonel Hawk. Pull back now. I repeat, pull back. The line is lost." Another voice. Her father's answered, hoarse but steady. "You pull back and you'll condemn them all. Hold your ground, Marcus." Then the feed cut out. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye turned to the colonel, who stood at the edge of the hall, pale under the fluorescent lights. He barked at the nearest technician. "Turn that off. Now! But the system didn't respond. The video replayed itself, looping the scene again and again. The metal, the names, the voices. The truth, alive and undeniable. Someone in the back whispered, "She's telling the truth." Another voice followed, "That's her. That's Devereaux." Allison stood near the front, frozen in place. Her phone hung limp in her hand. The image on the screen was impossible to ignore. The woman she'd humiliated, mocked, and called a thief. She was a war hero, the daughter of one of the greatest generals in Helios history. Colonel Hawk's composure cracked. "This is an act of sabotage," he shouted. "She's behind this. She's stolen and altered classified footage." His voice trembled with the effort to regain control. Maria took a step forward. "You can't alter truth," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. The room went still again. For a moment, even the alarm seemed to hold their breath. Hawk turned toward her, rage contorting his face. "You think you can come in here with your dirt and your lies and disgrace the academy?" "No," Maria said. "You did that yourself." Captain Sloan appeared beside her. His expression was grim, resolute. "Sir," he said to Hawk, "that footage was verified through Central Command servers. You can try to deny it, but the system has already distributed backups to every academy in the network. It's over." The colonel's face drained of color. Around him, cadets were whispering, recording on their phones, exchanging stunned looks. Years of pride and obedience cracked all at once. Maria didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. She turned and walked out into the corridor, her steps echoing softly behind her. The cold air of the courtyard hit her like a wave. She stopped by the same window as before, where she had seen her reflection that morning. Now for the first time she looked at herself differently, not as the janitor, but as the soldier she once was. The storm she had been waiting for had finally come, and there was no turning back. Behind her, the academy pulsed with confusion and anger, but above it all, one truth had been set free. The ghosts of Laconia had found their voice again, and they were speaking through her. Morning light broke through the storm clouds that had gathered over Helios Academy. The night had not healed the fractures that ran through its marble heart. It had only deepened them. Rumors had spread like wildfire, leaping from one wing of the campus to another. The footage, the ceremony, the battle, the unmistakable face of Maria Devereaux was on every cadet's lips, replayed in private dormitories and whispered about in the mess hall. Screens had been confiscated, messages censored, but it was too late. The truth was already loose, and no one could contain it. Inside the council chamber, the air was thick with tension. Rows of officers filled the room, some stone-faced, others whispering behind clasped hands. Reporters from state networks had been allowed limited access, their cameras focused on the polished mahogany table where Colonel Marcus Hawk sat, immaculate as always but pale, the skin around his collar damp with sweat. At the far end of the room stood Maria, flanked by two guards. Her uniform was plain gray, the same one she wore as a janitor, but her posture, straight-backed and unyielding, belonged to someone who had never been broken. The tribunal began with formalities. The Minister of Defense, a tired-looking man with silver hair and sharp eyes, presided from the head of the table. "This hearing is convened to address the matter of the unauthorized broadcast and allegations of misconduct during the Battle of Laconia, 20 years prior," he said. "Colonel Hawk, you may begin." Hawk stood, his movements mechanical. "Thank you, sir. The footage in question is falsified. It was designed to defame the Academy, the Armed Forces, and my command. The individual before you," he gestured toward Maria, "has infiltrated this institution under false pretenses, stolen restricted data, and manipulated historical archives. Her goal is to destroy reputations built on decades of service." The minister's gaze slid to Maria. "And what do you have to say to these accusations?" Maria met his eyes without flinching. "That truth doesn't destroy reputations. Lies do." A murmur rippled through the room. Hawk's jaw tightened. "She's a fraud," he spat. "She was never a soldier. The real Maria Devereaux died with her father. This woman's been using the name to—" "Enough!" The minister raised a hand. "Captain Sloan, You served under both General Devereaux and Colonel Hawke during that engagement. You will testify." Sloan rose from his seat near the back, his face lined with fatigue but steady. He saluted, then spoke. "Sir, I was there the night the line fell at Laconia. The withdrawal order came too early. We were told to abandon the ridge, but Lieutenant Maria Devereaux refused. She went back for the wounded. When the fires cleared, only a handful of us were alive because she disobeyed. I saw her carry 3 men out under fire. The medal shown in that broadcast, the Medal of the Sun, was hers. I watched General Devereaux place it in her hand myself." Whispers erupted across the room. The minister's eyes narrowed. "You're certain of this?" "I'd stake my commission on it," Sloan replied. Hawke shot to his feet. "This is hearsay. The man's loyalty is compromised." Before anyone could answer, a voice from the doorway cut through the noise. "You're right about one thing, Marcus. Loyalty is compromised. Yours." Every head turned. A man stepped into the chamber, his stride slow but unshaken. His uniform was worn, torn at the shoulder, but the insignia on his chest gleamed like fire in the pale light. His hair was silver now, his face marked by years and scars, yet there was no mistaking him. The minister rose from his chair, stunned. "General Raphael Devereaux?" Hawke's world seemed to tilt. He staggered back, color draining from his face. "That's, impossible. You're dead." "I was," the general said. His voice carried the weight of command even after 2 decades in exile. "Until I saw my daughter's face on that screen." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the cameras seemed to freeze. The general walked forward, each step echoing through the chamber. He stopped before Maria, his expression unreadable. "You've carried the burden long enough," he said quietly, and turned to face the tribunal. The minister recovered first. "General, you understand the gravity of your appearance. The records were rewritten," Devereaux interrupted, "by the man sitting over there." He pointed directly at Hawke, whose trembling hands gripped the edge of the table. "He ordered the retreat from Laconia. He abandoned his post and left his command to die. When the inquiry came, he buried the truth under fabricated reports and declared me killed in action. He built his career on my grave." Gasps filled the chamber. One of the reporters dropped her pen. Hawke shook his head wildly. "He's lying. He's senile, delusional. You can't prove any of this." Devereaux reached into the inside pocket of his tattered uniform and produced a data tablet. "This is the last transmission from my command post before the blast. The original logs, sealed under emergency encryption, I've had them all these years." He placed the device on the table and activated it. A holographic projection lit up the room. The battlefield again. The same chaos, the same desperate shouts. "Pull back now," came Hawke's voice through the static. Then Devereaux's reply, calm and resolute. "Hold your position, Colonel. You retreat, and you'll condemn them all." Another voice chimed in, Maria's, younger but unmistakable. "Sir, we still have wounded on the ridge. I can get them out." Then the explosion. When the recording ended, no one spoke. The minister exhaled slowly. "Colonel Hawke," he said, his tone flat, "do you have anything to add?" Hawke's mouth opened, but no sound came. His composure broke completely. "You can't, this after everything I built." His words tangled in panic. The guards moved toward him. "No! You think you can destroy me with some old ghost story?" He lunged for the tablet, but Sloan caught his arm. In a single motion, the guards restrained him, pulling his hands behind his back. "Marcus Hawke," the minister said, his voice carrying over the commotion, "you are hereby relieved of duty and placed under arrest pending formal charges of treason, falsification of military records, and dereliction of command." The colonel's voice broke into a ragged laugh. "You think this changes anything? You think she belongs here? She's nothing. She's a cleaner who got lucky." Maria stood motionless. For the first time since her return to this place, she looked down at him without anger. "I earned my place long before you learned to lie about yours." Hawke was dragged from the room, shouting until the doors slammed shut behind him. The chamber was left in stunned silence. General Devereaux turned back to the tribunal. "You asked if the footage was falsified," he said. "It wasn't. It was truth. The kind of truth men like Hawk fear because it strips them of the illusion of honor. He removed the medal of the sun from his pocket, the same medal that had once been used as proof of theft, and placed it on the table in front of Maria. "It belongs to you again." She hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted it. The metal was cold against her skin, but the weight was familiar. For a long time she had buried every trace of who she was. Now the world had forced her to reclaim it. The minister stood. "This tribunal finds that Lieutenant Maria Devereaux acted with valor and distinction. Her record will be restored, and the events of Laconia corrected in the historical register. As for you, General Devereaux, welcome home." The general inclined his head. "Home," he said softly, as if testing the word. As the room began to empty, the reporters murmuring, Maria remained where she was. The cameras lingered on her face, capturing the calm that had once been mistaken for servility. Outside the windows, the sun broke through the clouds, flooding the chamber with gold. For the first time in 2 decades, the light seemed to belong here. Maria glanced at her father, and he gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't triumph she felt, nor pride. It was something quieter, something closer to peace. The lies had been stripped away. The ghosts were finally laid to rest. But as they stepped out into the corridor together, the sound of distant voices echoed through the halls. Curiosity, awe, disbelief. The world outside had already begun to turn their story into legend. And legends, Maria knew, carried their own kind of weight. The fight for truth was over, but the burden of its aftermath was only beginning. The days that followed were like the quiet after a storm, when the wreckage lies still, but the air still hums with what has been broken. Helios Academy, once a monument to discipline and legacy, moved as though in mourning. The banners still hung high, the drills still sounded across the courtyards, but there was an unspoken heaviness in the air, a hesitation in the way the cadets saluted, in the way the officers avoided certain hallways. The tribunal's verdict had spread through every corridor, every classroom, every dormitory. The name Maria Devereaux was no longer spoken as an afterthought whispered over laughter. It was spoken with something that hovered between reverence and guilt. Colonel Hawk was gone, stripped of his rank, awaiting trial in a military prison beyond the city. The networks released footage of his arrest, and for a day the story consumed the capital images of a man who had built his empire on deception, now led away in chains. His daughter Allison disappeared from the academy soon after. Her name was removed from the honor roll, her records sealed, her privileges revoked. It was said that she left in the middle of the night, her once proud stride reduced to a hurried walk through empty streets. No one stopped her. No one laughed anymore. Maria didn't stay to see it. She had no interest in vengeance nor satisfaction in the sight of the fallen. She spent the morning after the hearing alone, sitting by the memorial garden, where the statues of old generals stood amid rows of roses and laurels. The air was cool and smelled faintly of metal and rain. In her lap rested the medal of the sun, still heavy, still gleaming in the pale light. She turned it over in her hand, tracing the engraved insignia, the rays of the Helios crest. She thought about how easily symbols could be twisted, how a medal meant to honor courage had been used to cover cowardice. Her father found her there, as he had years ago on another battlefield. He walked with a limp now, the result of wounds no one had ever treated properly, but there was still strength in his bearing. "They've offered you reinstatement," he said, his voice steady but low. "Full honors, a command post if you want it." Maria shook her head. "I've had enough walls and flags for a lifetime." He studied her face for a long moment. "You don't want to lead again?" "I never stopped," she said quietly. "Just no one was looking in the right place." A faint smile touched the corners of his mouth. "The world will look now." "Let them," she replied, "but I won't build my life around their gaze." He nodded slowly, as though he'd expected that answer. When he left, he didn't say goodbye, only rested a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of understanding between soldiers who had both seen too much to believe in ceremony. Within a week, the government issued a public statement restoring her record and rewriting the official account of the Battle of Laconia. Her name was listed among the honored dead, then crossed out and replaced under a new heading: Lieutenant Maria Devereaux, survivor, hero, witness. It was strange to see her own life corrected by people who had never known her, who had watched her mop floors without realizing whose footsteps they were echoing. She didn't attend the press conferences or the parades that followed. She let the politicians and generals have their moment in front of the cameras. Honor was their language, but she had learned to speak the quiet truth that needed no applause. When she finally returned to the academy grounds, it was not as a servant, but as an instructor. The board had requested that she lead a seminar on ethics and responsibility in command. She hesitated, then agreed, not for recognition, but because she understood how easily young soldiers could lose sight of what mattered. The first day she walked into the lecture hall, the cadets rose to their feet, not out of protocol but respect. She told them to sit, her tone calm but firm. "I'm not here to be remembered," she said. "I'm here so you don't forget." Her lessons were not from manuals. She spoke of the weight of orders, the price of silence, the meaning of courage when no one is watching. She told them that honor wasn't something pinned to your chest or carved into stone. It was the choice you made when everything inside you wanted to turn away. The cadets listened in silence, their notebooks forgotten. Some of them, the younger ones who had never joined in the cruelty, looked at her with the kind of reverence people reserve for saints. The older ones, those who had mocked her, couldn't meet her eyes, but she never mentioned what had happened. Shame, she knew, was its own punishment. As months passed, the academy changed, not in banners or mottos, but in something quieter. The arrogance that once defined its halls gave way to humility. Instructors spoke more softly. Cadets began to help the maintenance staff, not because they were told to, but because they understood now who had walked those halls before them. Even the marble floors seemed to carry a different echo, the echo of respect. Captain Sloan retired soon after, leaving his quarters unlocked. On the desk, he left a small box addressed to Maria. Inside was an old service pin, the kind awarded to soldiers who had completed 20 years of active duty. A note in his shaky handwriting read, "For the years you served while they pretended you didn't." She placed it beside her medal, not as a token of pride, but as a reminder of the ones who had stood quietly on the right side of history. Sometimes when the sun dipped low over the western courtyard, Maria would walk alone to the Hall of Heroes. The marble wall still bore her father's name, now re-engraved with new dates, the word presumed chiseled away. Below his plaque, someone had added another line. Lieutenant Maria Devereaux, duty without witness. She hadn't approved it, hadn't asked for it, but she never complained. She would simply kneel, run her fingers over the cold stone, and whisper, "Rest now." One evening she stayed there long after the cadets had gone, the light from the torches flickering across the marble. A breeze moved through the open arches, carrying the faint scent of the roses from the garden. She closed her eyes, hearing echoes of her father's voice, his laughter, the crackle of the radio on that last night. And then, for the first time in years, she smiled, not the tight, guarded smile of endurance, but something gentler, freer. Before leaving, she looked once more at the floor she had scrubbed for so many years. It shone in the firelight, spotless. She took a cloth from her pocket and wiped one last smudge near the base of the statue, not out of habit but gratitude. In that small act, the years folded together, the soldier, the outcast, the janitor, and the survivor, all one and the same. As she walked out into the night, her steps were steady, her head high. The medal hung beneath her jacket, unseen, its weight against her chest, no longer a burden, but a heartbeat. The Academy's flag stirred in the wind, its golden rays shimmering against the dark sky. Maria paused at the gate, looking back one final time. The halls behind her glowed softly, no longer symbols of shame, but of change. The world might forget her again someday. Titles faded, faces vanished, histories were rewritten. But what she had done, what she had endured, would remain. Not in books or statues, but in the quiet courage of those who learned from her. In every small act of decency that refused to bow to cruelty. She walked on as the night swallowed the academy behind her, and the stars above caught in the reflection of her medal for just a moment, light meeting light, before both disappeared into the dark. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful, true inspired stories are coming soon. Watch the next episode to see what happens next and share this video so more people can experience it too.